In today's show, a deflating day for the Trailblazers as they drop back to 7th in the draft, what it means and where they go from here. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen. Coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen and tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. It wasn't supposed to go like this, y'all. This was supposed to be a celebration podcast, but instead a deflating day in Blazers land. They head into the draft lottery in Chicago on Sunday afternoon, equipped with the fourth best odds of landing the number one overall pick, a 50% chance of landing in the top four, 13.2% chance of getting that number one overall pick. Again, the fourth best odds. And they fall back to 7th. 6 teams will pick before them in the NBA draft. This was, later in the show, I'm going to tell you. Let me map out the show real quick for you. Talk about what happened with the draft odds, with the draft lottery. I want to talk about why this is not great, but it's not the end of the world. And then we'll round out the mock drafts. Many of the big time mock drafters in the world, draft prognosticators in the world, come out with an immediate lottery reaction draft, and I'll round up who the big timers have the Blazers taken to close the show. Like I said, in the second segment, we'll talk about why this isn't the end of the world. I don't think it's the end of the world, but it would be false to say this wasn't a deflating feeling. You just watched the Trailblazers win 21 games, which means that if you tuned in, you saw them lose 61 times. And they went into the season young and you knew they were going to be bad. And it was like, okay, strap in, let's go for it. This ends with a reward, right? These are all these things. And you see them have one of the worst seasons in franchise history and they end up with 7th. That doesn't feel good. And I don't want to sit here and say you should actually be thankful and here's why. I think there's reasons to be optimistic about it not being the end of the world, but the idea that I will not pitch you on this being a good thing, actually TM. Hopefully if you're looking for that take exists on the internet. The good thing about takes is they're everywhere. Yeah, they're all over the map. Everybody's got one, and it's free to post videos on YouTube. But let's talk about how this ended up, because this was a really good piece of reporting from Jake Fisher of Yahoo Sports, who was in the draft room. This is a moment of, there was a moment when the Blazers got there yet again, one ping pong ball away yet again. So there's 1,001 combinations in the machine. The first 3 numbers come up, and it's like, all right, 1 away. And the teams that are 1 away include the Atlanta Hawks, who end up with the number 1 overall pick, more than them in a second. But in addition to Atlanta, Washington, Portland, San Antonio, Toronto, Memphis, and Houston. So you've got all your combos up, and 6 teams, as the last number is coming out, still have a chance at the number 1 overall pick. This isn't the Wemby draft, right? This is not a draft where even there's consensus at the top. I think most folks think it's going to be Alex Sarr, but I don't think anyone should be surprised if it's not Alex Sarr or someone trades out or whatever it is, right? There's just no consensus because while there might be a lot of decent players, there's no sort of surefire, this dude's going to change your franchise, you have to get him type of 1 overall pick. So there wasn't the sweat, right? It wasn't we're going to draft Victor Wembanyama and we're going to change the franchise and I'm going to keep my job forever type of thing, right? No executive was in that back room feeling that way, but you still want to win, right? These guys are competitive. And also I think being the first pick, well, it's maybe not everyone's cup of tea because you're the first team to screw it up. I think it is better because you want everyone behind you. You want to be able to make them have the widest decisions to cast. And when the combos come up, 7 teams on the board. Atlanta, Washington, Portland, San Antonio, Toronto, Memphis, and Houston. I said 6 before. The 6 other teams other than Atlanta. Atlanta ends up with the number 1 overall pick. Dang it! The Hawks came in with the 10th best odds, a 3% chance of winning the number 1 overall pick, and they get it. They get it. 97% be damned. 3% odds. Atlanta jumps up from 10 to 1. Washington is at 2. They didn't go anywhere, but you still have to win. The lottery's only for the top 4 picks. They ended up, their combos get them at 2. Brooklyn jumped up from 9 to 3. Here's the problem. The Brooklyn Nets traded for James Harden, who doesn't even play for their team. He plays for 2 teams beyond that now. What a time. Conveying a pick for a player that has not only been traded off your team, but traded off that team. What a time. The Nets had the 9th best odds, only a 20.3% chance of landing in the top 4. They end up at 3. But they owe that pick to the Rockets. So the Rockets, who sent their pick that they owed to Oklahoma City, they just get rewarded for doing what they do and chugging along. Another pick, another high pick. They're at 3. And San Antonio moved from 5 to 4. And because 3 teams jumped up in the lottery, right? It's only the lottery for the top 4 picks. So then it just starts in order behind that. So Detroit, what a miserable feeling for Detroit. Like, I feel for Blazer fans, right? But Pistons fans, that is so tough. That's literally the worst case scenario for them. From the worst record in the league, they've been the worst team in the league for like 3 straight years. Just in terms of like vibes, I think they've only had the worst record 2 straight years. But like 5. Ooh. 6, Charlotte, because of the tiebreaker. 7, Portland. The Blazers also got the 14th pick. The way they did it this year is, I've been talking to the shows, like when they flip it over, you want to see Golden State's logo. They flipped the logo of the pick that is owed to the team. So like when the first logo you saw was the Trailblazers, which was a little bit confusing, to be quite honest. It wasn't confusing for long, but there was like that split second of being like, how did they end up 14th? That's literally not possible. It's like, oh, this actually Golden State didn't go anywhere, and this pick is being conveyed to Portland because that's the rules, but they flipped over, hey, this is 14. I think that's easier for folks to understand, but maybe confusing for us that are deep in the weeds, like you, dear listener, and I. Like, wait, I thought it was supposed to be the Warriors. Oh, no. But the Blazers get up, they get the Warriors pick right away, and ends the drama. They get that pick. That is settled. And then they end up 7. They drop to 7. The Blazers, like, let's be clear about the math. 7 was the second most likely spot. The way it works, even with the 4th best odds, you have a 50% chance of landing in the top 4. But because they flattened the odds and they made it try to disincentivize tanking, Blazers haven't picked up on that. They have not picked up on the disincentivized tanking. They have been heavily incentivized to lose games on purpose. But the Blazers, even at 4, their best odds are 6, right? That they're about a quarter of their combinations land them at 6. Quarter of all 1,001 combinations land them at 6. And the Blazers had a 16.4% chance of landing at 7. That was the second most likely individual draft slot on their board heading into the night. So it wasn't like they defied the odds. They just had a 50% chance of getting a top 4 pick. If you combine all of those, there's a much greater chance of landing in the top 4 than 7. But like any individual slot, 7 was the most likely slot. It was more, a 50% chance at top 4 and a 40% chance of landing at 6 or 7. I mean, that's the math for you. The worst case scenario would have been 8th. That's the farthest they could have fallen. Not all 4 teams jumped in the lottery. The Wizards stayed there. So only 3 teams jumped the Blazers, and they fall back to 7. I think this is deflating. Like, I don't want to sell you on this. This is good, actually. I think that's nonsense, honestly. It reminds me of that classic internet meme with the dog in the fire. This is fine. This is fine. It's fine. This is fine. It's not the end of the world. Let me tell you why it's not the end of the world in the second segment. I am not going to I'm not going to blow smoke. I try to be honest about my feelings. Sometimes I'm maybe rosier than you. Sometimes I'm more pessimistic than you. But I'm not going to lie here. This was a deflating day, but I don't think 7 is the end of the world. Join me in the second segment, and I'll tell you why. But first, I want to tell you that this show is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's daily fantasy made easy. It's the most popular fantasy app that there is with over 300 million members. This is the number one fantasy sports app. It's easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action of daily fantasy sports while you watch your favorite sports teams and players during the playoffs, or as we get started with the WNBA season in the regular season. You just pick more or less on a 2 or more player stat entry and watch those winnings roll in. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. So you can turn $10 into $1,000 while you're watching basketball, while you're watching hockey, the NBA playoffs, or the NHL playoffs on your entries today on PrizePicks, America's number one fantasy sports app. PrizePicks has something for every sports fan, from basketball to hockey to League of Legends if you're into it, and everything in between. So you can pick LeBron James. Well, you can't because he's out. You can pick Anthony Edwards, Caitlin Clark, Connor McDavid, or Jude Bellingham, all in the same stinking entry. So download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for our first deposit match up to $100. The match you dollar for dollar on your first deposit up to $100 when you use that promo code LOCKEDONNBA. It's PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right. A deflating day, a really tough way to end the season. You know how I know it's tough? My boss texts me when 7 came up. Not my Locked On boss, but my day job boss. He texted me on a Sunday when the Blazers got 7. It was like, oof! And I was like, yeah, that's bad. I was like, yeah, it's bad. It's bad. He doesn't text me about basketball a bunch, but he was like, he felt it. Shout out to a friend of my boss, Sam and Bend. If you're listening, Sam, what's up? This was a deflating moment. This was a deflating day, a deflating coda to the season. It's not the end of the world. It's just bad news. Here's why it's bad news. You want to be higher up in the draft because you don't want other teams to make decisions for you, right? You don't want other teams to make decisions for you. Getting the top pick, like getting 1 in this draft, doesn't guarantee you get it right. It's not Victor Wembanyama. It's whatever. Getting 3 doesn't guarantee you get it right. But having less teams in front of you to make the decisions for you is just better. I think that's the very simple logic that we can all follow. But man, the general lack of consensus in this draft might make the difference between 3 and 7 there might be very little difference, there might be a great deal of difference from 1 to 10 on a lot of people's board. I don't think there's like 10 different prospects that could go 1. I think that's Adrian Wojnarowski said 4 or 5 on ESPN. I think I can believe that. I think Woj is in the ballpark. I would bet it's like 4, judging by the mock drafts I see. I would bet it's 4. I would bet it's. I think it's Sarr, Risache, Topic could be all be 1, and then anybody else is 4. That's how you get to 4. But that's just judging from the mocks that I read. And I really think, for the most part, I think you see Sarr at the top. But the lack of consensus behind that means that you might like someone. The Blazers might like someone at 7. They might say, okay, just like, for instance, Alexander Sarr is the number 1 guy on our board, but 2, we've got Ron Holland. Well, Ron Holland might just be sitting there at 7, right? And then you can just pick the second guy on your board. Or you say, like, our board is actually like, it's 2, we've got Risache, 3, we've got Matas Buzelis. Maybe they're both on the board at 7, right? Like, it might end up that way. Or if you're, obviously, like, the Blazers are probably pretty unlikely to chase either of the Kentucky guys, Reed Sheppard or Rob Dillingham, just because of positions. Like, they're just smaller, and it would be odd for them to pick another 6'3" guard. I think they can pick the wings. Like, I think 6'6" and above is fine. They can pick whoever, right? They can pick whoever. It doesn't truly, they have a blank canvas of a roster. They can make a lot of moves between now and whatever the next time they're good. But like, just realistically, it seems unlikely they would chase either Kentucky guys. Maybe they chase Nikola Topic because he's like a big guard. He's like 6'6" or whatever. I'd be curious to see if he gets official measurements, what he ends up at. But like, maybe because he can fit into that weird Delano Banton, like plays some guard, but also like can fit into bigger lineups because of just the size. But the lack of consensus means that you might have that opportunity for guys just to fall, right? Because your front office values and scouts players differently. Again, though, 6 teams are going to make decisions ahead of you. That's why it's just better to be higher up the draft. So it might mean that you end up with the player you want. You might end up with a good player. I think the lack of consensus can lead to a lot of confusion. You know, the draft that people like to draw parallels to here is the 2013 draft, which was a mess. So Anthony Bennett goes 1, and the good players in the draft went late, right? Like CJ McCollum went 10, Giannis Antetokounmpo went 14 off the top of my head, maybe 13, and then Rudy Gobert went 27. It's like a couple Hall of Famers in the back half of the lottery, and then the end of the second round. That's not how it works every time, right? That's not how it works every time. The 2017 draft, for instance, is a mess. Jason Tatum went 3. Like, there's a lot of messy picks after that. And then the late lottery, like Donovan Mitchell and Bam Adebayo, for sure, like, get there. There are drafts that are kind of, there are always stars in drafts. There are always stars. Finding them is incredibly hard. It's absolutely the Blazers' path out of the mud is to find that guy. 7, they're not doomed at 7 because of the lack of consensus. They also have a little bit of ammo. Well, first of all, let's throw this out here. I don't really care about this, and I don't think you should either. But 7 is a lower salary slot than 1, so if they had 1, they'd be even deeper into the luxury tax, and then they'd have to make some more moves to get them. Like if they were to take the number 1 overall pick, it's a guaranteed salary slot based on where you're selected. And so like they'd have to make some more moves and be a little more creative to get out of the tax. They have mildly more maneuverability at 7 than at 1. You know, it's a fairly big drop off in salary, but I don't think that's enough to be like, it's actually a good thing. It doesn't matter. You get in the draft, you lose all those games to pick high in the draft. You don't lose all those games to like have more maneuverability in the summer on a team that's not good. But that is certainly, that will be a very mild help moving forward. Like I said, it's not actually better, but I don't think it's a nightmare. And it's with 2 picks, with 7 and 14, the Blazers have some flexibility. I don't think it would make sense for them to trade up necessarily. I mean, maybe they like their guy. They say Zachary Sachet is going to be the best player in this draft, and he's not going to fall past 3. We have to find a way to trade up to 3, right? And maybe with 7 and 14, you get a team that's like, we don't care, but we want to get the heck out of here. We don't want this mess. The Rockets are like, you know, they don't like the players there, but they know if they drop back, then maybe they'll have Rob Dillingham, and they like that as an option, right? And you'll find a team that works, and you trade, you know, and multiple cracks at it appeals to some other team. You know, I wouldn't chase up necessarily just because I don't think this is the draft to chase up. But if they want to, they can. Like I'm gonna say this a bunch during draft season, like. I am operating under the assumption that I know a lot less than the Blazers. It doesn't mean that I'm going to agree with everything they do, but like they're doing this deeper than me. I'm just some dude, right? So if they like it, it gives you the opportunity it gives you the opportunity to trade up. It gives you the opportunity to trade back as well, because say you start to read the board and you say like, hey, we're at pick 7. We know based on the board right now that we like these 6 guys. One of them is going to fall there. Or you say, okay, we'll trade from 7 back to 8. You'll give us, you know, we'll still get who we want. And we'll flip 14 for a future pick, right? And you end up like, okay, we only take 8 in this draft, but now we have an unprotected 2026 pick or something, you know, something like they have, because they have this maneuverability, they have a lot of ways to move around. You'd have maneuverability with 3 and 14. You'd have maneuverability with 2 and 14. So I'm not selling you on anything new here. I just don't think it's a nightmare, right? I think they still have some chess pieces to move. The real truth is this. And this is the thing that's going to permeate until they do get it. They're stuck here until they're not. And I want to finish with this. I think when things go, we're gonna do mock drafts in the 3rd segment, but I want to finish the 2nd segment real quick here. It's like, I know that there is a tendency when this goes wrong to be like, see, tanking doesn't work. And it might not work, right? Because like not that many teams win the title. But like it worked for the Spurs. Look how good they are. Even like look how good they already can be, right? They have a generational talent. Losing helped them. You know, OKC losing the way they did, it allowed them to be as good as they are right now. It works. It works. Does it lead to surefire championships? No, nothing does. Literally nothing does. The thing that does is nailing draft picks. It's nailing draft picks. For something like 95% of the league. The way to, maybe even more than that, the way to get out of where you are, the way to get out of stuck is to nail draft picks. The Blazers have to get this right. I don't think like tanking is what tanking does is give you an opportunity, gave you a chance, gave you 13.2% chance. The math didn't win here. The way to get out of this is to get these picks correct, or you're stuck in the cycle again. Because if the Blazers say they don't get 7 right, they're not going to sign free agents. They're going to like, that's not magically, they're not going to be a place to sign free agents. They're going to be bad again into the future. Like the way they get out of this is getting picks right. I categorically reject the idea that this is proof that tanking doesn't work. Proof that tanking doesn't work is that it's hard to win, right? But plenty of teams have gotten bad and found a star, and a bunch of teams have gotten bad and made mistakes over and over and over and over and over again, and got stuck in the mud for a long time. But the teams that get out of it because they draft well. That is the path forward. And the best way to draft well is to pick high in the draft, and the best way to pick high in the draft is to lose. Tanking sucks. It is so unbelievably unfun, and I hate covering the team that loses on purpose for several seasons in a row. I do 250 shows a year. The scourge of tanking, I feel it in my bones. I don't like it at all. But I do think like this, unfortunately, is the path out. I hate it. I hate it to be true, but I think it's the path out. Okay, speaking of the path out, let's round up some mock drafts. I got ESPN, Yahoo, Ringer, USA Today, and Bleacher Report on deck. That's 5 different mocks, all showing the Blazers with different picks for the most part. Join me in that third segment, won't ya? But first, let me tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. It's FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Let's round up some mock drafts. Let's do it. Here's the Blazers 7-14. I'm going to round up a couple of these. As promised on the show last week, like this is when people do it. They say, okay, lottery set. I got it going. As soon as I get the order, I'm going to boop, 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 and put it all together and publish it right away. And we got the heavy hitters on a Sunday. We'll start with ESPN, where Jeremy Woo and Jonathan Givony have the Blazers taking Nikola Topic at 7 and Tijan Salah at 14. Topic is really an interesting pick, right? He's been mocked as high and some as 1 overall. He's typically, you see him in that 4-5 range. If he falls to 7, the Blazers, and they really like him. This is one of those interesting ones, right? Where it's like, is he big enough that you feel like he can be part of the core? This would be one of those where you just have to trust that they know talent, right? And that you're saying this talent will trump all of the other problems. It's not a snug fit. Like I think we can all agree, it's not a snug and simple fit, but I think, and I've been consistent about this, I don't think the Blazers have enough talent on the roster that they can poo-poo someone if it gets up to a certain level. I don't know what that level is from where I sit, but I think there's a certain level from a professional scouting department where they say like, this dude grades out as like so much higher than the dudes behind him, and if he falls to us at 7, we cannot pass up. It'll create a domino effect of strange decisions. It'll be an awkward, like another ball dominant guy who can't really shoot next to Scoot. Is that going to work? Like it's a whole nother thing that we talk about. If we get there, we'll talk about it. But like, it would be an interesting thought experiment, although maybe miserable for the fan base. And Salah is like a big a big upside swing. I like him as an upside swing. Obviously, when you're taking an upside swing, you have to know that you can strike outs, and maybe he's just like straight up not an NBA player. But, the big off-ball guy who plays, off-ball forward who plays hard, and maybe you can craft some other skills around that. At Yahoo Sports, Kristen Peak, friend of the program, has the Blazers taking Ron Holland of the G League Ignite at 7, and Eva Misi, the big man from Baylor, at 14. Holland, I kind of have warmed and cooled. He was, going into the G League, he was supposed to be this surefire prospect. He kind of struggled a little bit, but then had some moments. And when he was G League, when he was okay. And I think some folks really like Holland as high as I've seen him on 2 on mocked as like second best player in the draft on big boards. I've seen him in mock drafts where he falls to the late lottery at 13 and 14. A really interesting player, right? Like I think his upside is something like Andre Iguodala light, and his downside is Desmond Mason or something like that. Like maybe he's just like an athlete who tries hard and can't shoot, right? Interesting prospect. I don't hate him. Wouldn't hate him at 7. I think it's interesting. I'll be very curious this week at the draft combine what Ron Holland measures at. If he is, I saw him, I thought he was like 6'5", 6'6". If he's like 6'5" and some change, it's a different player. If he's 6'6" and some change, 6'7" and 6'7", barefoot 6'6" and some change, then maybe he's like can play a lot of small forward in the league, and it's fine. Even Misi, big rim roller shot blocker from Baylor. I wouldn't say I'd be excited about that pick, but I don't know enough about him to have strong opinions. At the Ringer, Kevin O'Connor has the Blazers taking Zach Risachet at 7 and Jacoby Walter, 6'5" wing from Baylor, at 14. Risachet seems like a skill set wise, very, very interesting fit for the Blazers, right? Because he is 6'8" and can defend and shoot. And what do they need? They could use a wing defender who could shoot it. That would be a great fit. They have a bunch of other wings, but none of them have been consistent shooters in the league. Tamani Kamara had a stretch. Chris Murray and Jabari Walker have not been good shooters at all, been straight up bad ones. Add to their stable of wings. They still definitely need like a starting level 3 and 4 for the future of this team. I don't think you can bank on any of the players in the roster as like, for sure, this guy's going to be on the next great Blazer team. And at 7, I think Risachet is a totally reasonable fit. He doesn't have a lot of on-ball juice, but perhaps just the floor of being like a skill set that works in the league is like easily worth it. And I think at 7, you wouldn't have to talk me into it. I would say, heck yeah. It's at like 2 where I'd be like, that's a lot at 2. There's a lot of hope at 2, but I think Risachet at 7 would be easy peasy for me. Jacoby Walter, I just don't know enough about him. I know he was a very highly recruited player and then spent a season at Baylor where he wasn't as good. He might be a perfect 3-and-D type of, mostly a 2 guard who can play up a little bit because he's got long arms, but we shall see. I will have to get someone on to tell me more about Walter because I don't know enough from where I sit. USA Today, Jeff Zilgett and Scooby Axon have a mock draft where the Blazers take Donovan Clingan at 7 and Duke's Jared McCain at 14. Clingan I like. I think there is some risk in taking a guy who can only play center in the league, without positional versatility. I think like the league isn't totally positionless, but the ability to guard across multiple positions has some value, and the ability to like maybe plug into different lineups to play different shapes and sizes has some value. Clingan is a true 5, right? But he's a giant person, right? He's taller than 7 feet. He's got okay touch. I worry about his offense in the NBA. Like, I don't know how good he's going to be on offense. I think he's going to be a good defensive player. Like, I think he'll end up being a good defensive center. But is he like, is he Clint Capella? Is he Clint Capella light, or is he something more than that, right? Because if he's Clint Capella light, that's like a long-term NBA player who's played on some really good teams, but that's maybe not like deeply exciting at 7. I think he has potential to be a lot more than that, but there's certainly, I have some questions about what his offense looks like in the pros. McCain is, I would bank on McCain being a pretty good NBA player because he can shoot it. He's 6'3" and he has good touch. Was at Duke this year, and he's had some monster games, even in big games. Had 2 great games against Carolina. Lost them both though, over 2. But he could shoot a little bit, and he has a little bit of driving game. He's just like not a point guard. He was not a point guard at Duke, I should say. He was totally an off-ball player. An off-ball 6'3" guy is just like, It's not an ideal prototype in the league, but I would bank on Jared McCain being an NBA player because of the shooting. Like I bet he'll play in the league for a while because he can shoot it, and that shooting touch and a little bit of offensive touch that, like, you know, you could play 10 years in the league coming off the bench. At Bleacher Report, Jonathan Wasserman has the Blazers taking Donovan Clingan at 7 and Jacoby Walter at 14. Two familiar names. The only overlap there. So of the 5 I just read you, 4 different names at 7. Topic, Holland, Risache, Clingan. And 4 different names out of the 5 drafts at 14. Tijan Salon, Eva Misi, Jacoby Walter, Jared McCain, it gives you a sense of the lack of where we're at. Like, there just isn't a strong consensus right now with where this draft is going to be. This week is the NBA draft combine. Guys will get measured. They'll play. The people who do draft stuff professionally will hear the whispers and hear all of those things. Talk to NBA personnel, and we'll get a better sense. And we'll start to get, I think the boards will kind of, I think the mock drafts will kind of get that, you'll start to see more consensus. There is a danger of groupthink in these things, right? Is if you're all in the same spot, all in Chicago, all talking to the same people, you know, it's lying season. It's like the season where everyone lies for a month. So there is a danger in the groupthink, but I think if we start to see a consensus develop, it'll be very interesting to track, and we just might not ever. So I will continue as new mocks come up. I'll share them. I don't share every which one. Like, there was one that I saw from a major outlet that had the Blazers taking Reed Shepherd, and they said that he'd be a nice pairing next to Scoot Henderson, not mentioning the existence of Anthony Simons or Shaedon Sharpe, a name I just forgot. I'm not remembering the existence of Shaedon Sharpe myself, but like, I'm not going to share the nonsense with you. I want to share things that make at least a little bit of sense to you. So I'll do my best scouring the internet for the best takes. I'm going to bring draft people on for the next month. I'm going to bring some friends from the Locked On Podcast Network on for the next month and talk sort of trades and moving up and moving down and what teams in the lottery might do. And hopefully we will just get a good broad sense of what promises to be a major night in Blazers history. It's what we do. We track everything here, and I'll try to make it interesting and fun as we lead up to the draft. Honestly, I will make it interesting and fun as we lead up to the draft. That's a hope and a promise. How about this? Come back tomorrow for another show, 5 days a week, wherever you get podcasts, and also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.